Hello, and welcome back to the Cinema Scoop podcast with Sam and Jordan. And today we're going to be going over movies that, quote unquote, cured my depression, which I think is like a lofty way of just saying movies that make you feel good when you're sad or when you've gone through something or you just want something that can make you feel happy about life. We are not trained professionals. We do not make claims that movies actually cure depression, but you can get kind of close. Movies can feel like therapy in a lot of ways. And we each have picked 5 movies each that have helped us through rough times. We've gone through a lot of things together and separately. We have lost family members. We've lost parents. In the last year and a half, we've lost 3 dogs. We've had some pretty substantially low points in our lives. And we picked 5 movies each that sort of make you feel better about life when things are really shitty. So, yeah, I think, Sam, if you want to go first.
So, yeah, I can go first. So the first movie I want to mention is Drive My Car from 2021. It's a Japanese film. It was nominated for Best Director, Best Foreign Film. Ryusuke Hamaguchi is the director, and it's pretty long, but it's very good at visualizing and vibing through the sadness of the main character has something bad that happens to him early on, and he has to emotionally deal with that. And then he's like a theater director, and part of the stipulation of getting this new job that he gets is that they pay for a driver, so they have this woman drive his car for him. And they talk about their shared experiences of losing people and relationships. And visually, it's a very striking film with all of the long shots of the car driving. It's like melancholy, but with a twist of hope at the end. And it's one of those movies that is about depression, but it sees you through it as you're watching it. And yeah, this was a Fire Things Club pick. And I think you were going to pick this one as well, but I picked it first, so.
Well, you showed me this movie, and I think we watched this, at a time where I probably needed to see it, just because it's definitely, a movie about loss and, grappling with, how do you pick yourself up and move on from loss and, inexplicable loss and feeling as though there is no meaning in life after you've had loss and trying to find meaning again in life. It's a very sad movie, but at the same time it's feels very raw and hopeful at the very end of the movie. But I think one of my favorite parts is both of them smoking cigarettes with their hands out the sunroof at one point. There's just this really beautiful shot of both of them doing that. And the other thing that's really cool about this movie is that it's about it's also about companionship in a very platonic sense, and how you can bond with someone in a platonic sense because you've both gone through loss, which I feel movies don't really do. It's either romantic or not. It doesn't exist, as far as bonding with someone. Yeah, I really like that movie too.
Okay, what's your first pick?
These aren't in any order. So my first pick is Punch Drunk Love. I'm not totally into Paul Thomas Anderson yet as a director. I really want to see more Paul Thomas Anderson movies, but this was one that I saw by myself on a rainy day and was I've just heard that this is supposed to be very good and very heartfelt and illuminating in terms of mental illness and depression and a general sense. The main thing that is really interesting about this movie is that it's one of Adam Sandler's first non-comedy roles that he took before Uncut Gems and any of the other drama movies that he ended up kind of moving into in his later parts of his career. But what I like about this movie is that there's a lot of symbolism, and it's basically like a guy who has anger management issues, but also has anxiety. And there's a very specific scene that is just so... one very main reason why I love this movie is that it like shows family dynamics and how incredibly anxiety inducing they can be sometimes. Even when you love your family, how it can feel like you have 7 sisters that are around you bombarding you with the same question over and over again. Like there's literally a scene where he has like, I don't even know, 7, I think it's like 7 sisters that are just always asking him like, why'd you go crazy that one time? What happened with this thing? Why'd you go crazy? And like, he just snaps and like loses it because he's like sick of everybody in his head. But I also love how this movie just shows that like feelings of isolation and feelings of like loneliness can really like be like that cold feeling of feeling really alone. Like it shows him falling in love with a woman, and it like very accurately shows that feeling of like warmth that occurs when you finally find someone that like you can feel like yourself with. There's specifically another scene in this movie that I love where he's like in Hawaii and he picks up a payphone to call her, and like it's like very dimly lit and it's hard to see, and then he's like trying to get a hold of this woman, and as soon as he gets a hold of her, like the actual booth of the payphone like lights up, almost like it kind of has this like warm glow, almost like you can tell that like Adam Sandler has this like warm glow about him from feeling connected to another person, even if it's just over the phone, but like also feeling like emotionally connected to another person. But yeah, I think like anger problems is not often talked about or shown in a lot of movies in like as pretty of a way as this movie does. It's a gorgeous movie though, like coloring and like everything. I just really like it. And again, it has a really kind of happy story with it that I really love. And there's also that really great scene where they cross the hallway and meet each other, and it's just their silhouettes kissing, and that's like a beautiful shot too. So that's probably my most like romantic choice on this list. So yeah, what's your next one?
So my next one is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I just think, I'm sure most people have seen this one from the 80s. John Hughes, Matthew Broderick. Yeah, it's just a one day of taking it easy, doing what you want, not taking anything too serious. And I think, I mean, obviously, Cameron, his friend, is basically depressed, and he basically takes him out of it by doing all these fun, cool things in Chicago for the day. And I just think it's like a universally liked movie, and it just is a good vibe, a good time, and it makes your mood better, I feel like, if you just put it on.
Yeah. Infinitely quotable too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I specifically love the like parts where Ferris Bueller like breaks the fourth wall and like kind of tells the audience like the life lesson that's going on and like what's going on through his head. Like I specifically really like that part.
Okay, what's your next one?
My next one is My Neighbor Totoro, which I think is probably the least on subject of like mental health. It's very hard to describe this movie because it's like got a lot of magical realism in it. So if you haven't seen it, it's basically a family of 2 daughters and a dad move to like the countryside in Japan, and their mom is in the hospital recovering from an unknown illness that's not really ever said what it is. And the 2 younger girls are sort of like trying to grapple with like mom's not here and it's just dad watching us. And it's never explicitly said that they're going through a rough time dealing with not having their mom around, but it's pretty obvious that like, I mean, May I think is like 4 or 5 maybe, and Satsuki is like maybe 8 or 9. Like they're pretty young, and so they're both kind of in this like very young, sort of imaginative, creative age of like still playing pretend and still having like daydreams and still having like imaginary friends and things like that. But they're trying to make sense of not knowing if their mom will ever come home, and then like understanding too that like death is a real thing and she could die, and like not knowing what that means or why it would happen. And so basically the premise of the story is that they sort of have this imaginary friend Totoro that is a forest animal. He kind of looks like a bear, panda. I don't really know what he is, but they basically use him as sort of like a, I don't know the right word for it, but it's like a surrogate comforter in a way. And like the movie ends happy. That's another really good thing about this. But like I don't know, you'd seen it with Grace and you were like, you really need to see this. And every time I watch it, I get very tearful because it's just, it brings you back to that feeling of being a kid. And when something bad happens to you when you're a kid, your first thing that you resort to is making up scenarios in your mind and having daydreams about like ways that it could go right, and trying to like fantasize about, you know, as a kid would do, about like how you might fix it or how you might save your parent or things like that. And I think that gets played out in the movie pretty well. So yeah, I really like this one.
Yeah, they use a lot of childlike wonder to like get past the sadness of their mom not being there, but and like the unknown of where they are at as they're at a new location. So
yeah,
it's very good. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Grace loves it too, which is another positive.
So my next pick is one that I just watched a few weeks ago for the first time. It just came out last year. I've never heard of it until I saw it on this app called Mubi, M-U-B-I. It's directed by Michael C. Carlson, who's a Swedish director, director, but he edited the film Triangle of Sadness, which was an Oscar movie recently. It's called A Tiger in Paradise, and it's pretty short. It's just 78 minutes, and it's basically a surreal journey into the singer Jose Gonzalez's thoughts and how he creates his music, but he's like in the Swedish countryside, and it's just very visually like calming and soothing, and like he like has a lot of big brain midlife crisis questions that he thinks about, that most people think about, but like he approaches them pretty calmly and with like a whimsical macro view, and like he plays a lot of original songs, and it's just a really mellow, good time. Like it's almost like a dream that you're watching. You can tell he's kind of like in that midlife crisis of sadness about just not anything specific, but just at a certain point, you think about every little thing that you can think about and how 90+% of it you have no control over, and it's very existential. But the way it's shot and the way it progresses is very calming, and it's very good to cure depression. So I wanted to mention it.
I need to see that one still.
A Tiger in Paradise.
And it only came out 2023, yeah? Yeah, so it's like...
It's only available on Mubi, and only 1,000 people have seen it on Letterboxd. So
Get in while it's hot.
The 3 people listening to this will probably not be able to watch this, but it's good.
If you get a movie trial, though, it's probably worth it.
Yeah, you can get a 7-day or a 30-day trial and watch it and cancel it, but I would recommend it if you have depression.
We have like a 1 hour. We have a 1 month movie trial right now. So I need to get in and watch this before our trial runs out. Okay, so my next one, we're getting into some top tier territory here. This is one that I just hold so close to my heart. It's Swiss Army Man. It's the first Daniel brothers movie. They're not brothers, but they're Daniels. They're both Daniels, and they did this movie before they did Everything Everywhere. I recently rewatched this one. I think I've only seen it 3 times. It is a weird fucking movie. I will start off by saying that. And I know several people that personally just don't like it because it's just too weird for them. There's like a lot of...
Let's get over the farting.
If you get over the boners and you get over the farting, you're in. You're good. Like, that's literally it. That's the hardest part to understand about this movie. But when I rewatched it, I just realized, like, so much of, like, what's happening there is so, like, happy and hopeful and, like, kind of gives you, like, the oomph you need to have, like, a zest for life again. Basically, what happens is, like, Paul Dano is, like, stranded and he's going to commit suicide and he's, like, about to hang himself, and Daniel Radcliffe's dead body washes up on the shore of the beach where he's about to kill himself. And he becomes intrigued by the dead body of Daniel Radcliffe because he sort of sees him as like a sign that he shouldn't commit suicide. He's like, oh, you've come to like save me. And like basically Daniel Radcliffe is like powered by farts and like is a farting dead body. And it, like the title says, he's a Swiss Army man. So like he can like spit up a bunch of water for you. He can like propel you across water with his farts as like a boat. And basically very early on in the movie, he becomes like sentient in a way that he is a dead body, but he understands nothing about human life. And so Paul Dano is having to describe to him what it's like to be a human, while Daniel Radcliffe is sort of this like limp, lifeless tool of a person. And he's like not understanding like, what is food? What is the sun? What is this? Like, what are girls? Like, why is this thing happening to my body? Like all these different things. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, but you're intrigued by the concept of Paul Dano sort of like metaphorically talking to himself and trying to like reinvigorate his self to like want to live again by teaching a sentient dead body why it's good to live and what matters in life. Like it's an incredible movie. It's a 5 out of 5 star movie in my mind. Like it's, if you liked Everything Everywhere, you'd probably also like this because it's that same level of like, oh, that's really, really weird, but it strikes the right like emotional note. So I already want to rewatch it again because I just rewatched it like 2 weeks ago or something, but I like already want to rewatch it. But yeah, that's my next one.
Yeah, I really like that one as well. Okay, my next one is Sherlock Jr. from 1924, a 100-year-old film by Buster Keaton. And it's very short. It's like 40-something minutes, but it's like, it's hard to watch that and like sit in a chair, put it on the screen, watch it for 40 minutes, and when it's over, not feel some sort of happiness just because of the way it's made, the story it's telling. It's kind of just it's about a projectionist who dreams about being a detective to win the girl, and it's a silent movie, black and white, but it's like a universal, this is a good movie and this is a good time and this will make you happy. And it's like you're rooting for the underdog. You love the main character. He's so funny and smart, and it's one of those where if you are, it's similar to Tiger in Paradise, where if like it doesn't really talk. Well, this one doesn't talk about depression at all, but it's like if you watch it, it's hard to be depressed afterwards, at least for a little bit. So I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think we've both seen it, or I've seen it with you twice. It's very short. It's free to watch on YouTube because it's public domain basically at this point because it's so old. But specifically, like a lot of the stunt work is very, very, very good. It's Buster Keaton, so like he's kind of doing all his own things. But I definitely love like a lot of the dreamy visuals of like seeing yourself within a movie that happens in this movie. It definitely is like kind of meta in that way for like a 100-year-old movie. Like what?
Yeah, the camera work or the actual film editing stuff that they do for it to be 1924 is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Like there's a lot where I'm like, I know how they would do that today, but how did they do that back then?
Yeah.
Like true movie magic, practical effects. Okay,
what's your next?
My next one is one that you haven't seen, but I will probably do a double feature of this and Tiger in Paradise because I haven't seen Tiger in Paradise. A film called Taste of Cherry, and I think it won the Palme d'Or in 97. Basically, the concept behind the movie, this sounds really like heavy, but the way it's shot doesn't feel very heavy. Basically, the main character, Mr. Badi, is planning on killing himself, and the movie doesn't tell you why he wants to. It's never revealed. The movie starts out, and that's how you meet the character, is you understand that that's what he's on a trek to do, is he's trying to find somebody who will help bury his own body. And so he has his sedan that he drives, and basically he picks up people that need rides, and he's like trying to kind of convince someone to bury his body the next day. And so his pitch is basically, hey, I'm going to pay you a good amount of money. I'm going to go kill myself and put myself in this hole that I've dug on the top of this mountain underneath this tree. And if you could just come back tomorrow morning, if I'm alive, could you help me up out of the hole? If I'm dead, can you go ahead and just like bury me? And I'll pay you either way. And it basically chronicles him attempting to hire, I think it's like 3 different people. The first guy basically tells him like he won't do it for him because he believes it's wrong to kill yourself. And he's like, I can't help you because I won't be complicit with like suicide because I disagree with suicide. The second guy says no because it's a religious sin to him to be complicit to suicide because he believes that if you commit suicide, you don't go to heaven and all this stuff. And you can tell that like Mr. Badi is like, that's not the point. Like, I'm asking you to do a different job. Like, you're not helping me decide. You're just helping me in whatever the outcome is of what I do. Like, it's purely business is what I need. And so basically, like, both of the men say no and get out of his car. But the last guy that he ends up picking up is, and I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but it's like Mr. Bagiri, I think, is a lot older. And he basically outright is like, yeah, I need to because I think it's his daughter is ill. And he's like, I need money for her illness. So like, I'll do this for you. But basically most of the movie is just him driving in a car, having long philosophical conversations with people about life. And specifically with Mr. Bagiri, like when they're in the car together, he is just like such a great motivational speaker in terms of like telling Mr. Badi like what he ought to hear. He like tells him in like no short of words. He's like, I understand that like you have your mind made up as to what you're going to do, but like this is kind of my opportunity to like tell you what you need to hear. And so I'm not going to hold back, and I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And so he shares with him basically like a story about how he once thought about committing suicide, but realized that like, and this doesn't really give anything away, but the Mr. Bagiri basically tells him like, I once thought about committing suicide, but then I found these cherries that I ended up tasting and realized like I'd never tasted them before. And so I took them home to my wife, and my wife tasted the cherries. And I realized in that moment, like I would be giving up any new experiences. And are you ready to say that you're ready to give up any new experiences in your life just because you've had bad experiences? And like they have a really good kind of like back and forth banter about like, it's my right to commit suicide. It's my choice. You can't like, if God loves me, then he would allow me to end my suffering. So like very, very like deep, heady questions that someone might have if they were actually like considering suicide. But it just was like a movie that just made me so happy because I don't feel like a lot of movies really talk about those things in a way that feels like real. Like I feel like a lot of movies when they like touch on suicide, they're sort of like, oh, cheer up, like it'll be better or whatever, when like in actuality, like people have real questions about like, what if I don't think I can do this anymore? What if I'm like scared? What if I'm like terrified of going on? Like I feel like I'm devolving into nothing, and like this is the happiest ending I can possibly think of. And like I don't know, it's just such a good movie. And the visuals are like stunning, just being like that it's mostly sandy and dusty. And there's a lot of scenes where you can't even see what's happening in the movie. You just see like sand and then like sunshine and like someone's shadow through dust. And like it's just a very, very compelling movie in terms of like feeling good about life again. And it does have kind of an ambiguous ending, but I feel like that's what life is life has ambiguous endings to everything. And so yeah, I talked about that one for a little longer than I should have, but I really like that one, and we'll definitely
I need to see it. Yeah. Okay, my last one, this is more of a personal pick, but it's Avatar 2: The Way of Water. It's obviously not about depression or anything. It's like, well, number one, I like it a lot. Number two, it's like a visual experience. Like, obviously, the first Avatar was a cultural phenomenon. It was the biggest box office hit ever. They made a sequel 2 years ago. James Cameron's going to make a lot more sequels, apparently. But this one, I think it's better. It's a better movie than the first one, I feel like. It's one of those movies where if you're sad and you put this movie on, it like forces you to escape to that world, and it's pretty long, so it's like you're in that world, you're in the water, you're experiencing things that they're experiencing, even though it's all CGI. It's just what it's like. It's hard to describe because it's a singular film, even though it's a sequel. But even I think it's even way better than the first one visually, just with how they do all the water sequences, and it's got great action sequences, good family drama. But I just think there's a lot of movies that you can say are like blockbuster movies that are world building, that are kind of long, that you can just sit down and watch. And there's plenty of other like Star Wars-esque films that I could put here, or that are like top movies. But this one specifically, I think, came at a time where like was at the end of the year, and I wasn't necessarily depressed at the time, but it was like it like forces you to like watch this movie. Like it's like
delete your brain content.
Yeah, like if you're like, okay, I want to watch a movie, you're already in a headspace of like, I'm trying to visually escape my reality to either be entertained, or I'm intrigued on this director or these actors or the story or whatever you like movies for. I just think that at least for me personally, this one, it's like, it's hard to describe. It's just like you're in the screen with these blue people in the water, and that's the movie. And it's hard for me personally to be sad when I'm experiencing that. But it is an experience for sure.
Did you see it in theaters too?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters with my brother. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the third one and however many more he's going to make.
I still haven't seen that one, but I honestly think I need to go back and rewatch the first one and then watch that one. But I have a strong inclination. I mean, I liked the first Avatar fine. It's been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah, the first Avatar I also saw in theaters with my brother and my dad, but I never really went back to it. I saw that I didn't like it. I just, like, it was an experience, and he saw it in theater, and that was kind of it. And then I think I saw it once randomly throughout the next 10 plus years, and then I rewatched it before I went to see the second one in theaters, but the second one is definitely better in my opinion. But that was my list.
I like your list.
So what's your last one?
My last one, I've only seen this movie 2 times, and I think I'll reserve it for like special times because it feels like a very special occasion type of movie. It's the Jim Jarmusch 2016 movie Patterson with Adam Driver, who I love. This is a really hard movie to describe because I think for some people, I don't think this movie is for everyone because it's kind of, this sounds bad, but it's like semi-plotless.
Yeah, it's just a guy doing what he does.
It's just a guy on his daily routine multiple days over. But like, I don't know how to describe this movie except that it's like very hyper realistic to all of the best parts of
it. It
life.
depicts like the small things in life to be like super happy and
exactly. And like he's in like a loving, committed relationship with this woman, and like it just shows that like, you know, when you're in like a long-term relationship with someone, they can develop hobbies, and how like every day they'll update you a little bit more on their hobby, and like this sharing of ideas of like, I'm going to learn a guitar now. I'm going to order a guitar online. Look, the guitar is here now. Like it shows that progression. And like Patterson, who is Adam Driver in the movie, is a poet, but he just drives a bus. And so every day she packs his lunch and he like sits on a bench and he writes his poetry, and like his poetry is like shown visually on the screen. So if you just like Adam Driver's voice reading poetry, you'll probably like this movie because it's just slow, and it's like ASMR on screen because you're just like watching Adam Driver read his poetry as he reads it. I also haven't seen a lot of Jim Jarmusch movies, but I've heard that this is like very similar to a lot of his movies where it's just like a quiet, restrained, happy type of movie. But there's also like, I said at the top of this review that like it's plotless, but if you're willing to like get through basically the first half that feels plotless, there is actually like a story to it that develops over the latter half of the movie that does have stakes, and there are like moments that aren't completely happy that brings more weight to the movie in like a very like appropriate way. But I just think like there's a very specific message behind this movie, which is like continue to try and like keep trying, even if something like a dream of yours is completely destroyed or if it's completely impossible, like just keep trying. And like it also is like a very good movie for like understanding that like just because you may not be good at something, or you might not be like a professional at something, like being a poet or playing the guitar, for instance, the people in your life that like support you in pursuing things that make you happy, and like how they support you is like your fan base in a way. And like that's all that matters, is that people are supportive of you in like your pursuits to be happy. And yeah, I don't know. I really, really liked this movie when I watched it the second time. The first time I kind of was like, yeah, this is good, but I think we'd only been maybe married for like 2 years at that point. So it was kind of like, yeah, this is good. It's nice to see a wholesome relationship on screen. Like, that's great. But like after being married for 10 years, I watched this and I was just like, oh, this is so perfect. And it like is a love letter to like long committed, boring relationships. I don't mean that in a negative way towards us. I mean that in like boring is good. And like,
I mean, if you're gonna have a long-term relationship, you're gonna have days that are more routine and not uneventful. That's just life, which is part of the movie.
and it like brings this really nice beauty to that like you can sort of view your life through this lens of like, I can sort of romanticize every single day of my life the same way. And yeah, honestly, it's just a really, really good movie that makes me feel super happy about life. But yeah, that's all of our movies. I think
They're not depressed anymore.
hope we've cured you. Yeah, there's like a lot of other movies that we could have arguably talked about. Like, you know, I think like Secret Life of Walter Mitty is another really great one. There's, you know, several other movies that like talk about depression that we could talk about, but these are just like the top 10, 5 for each of us that personally kind of give us a zest for life and make life worth living. So yeah, if you're sad, take a listen to any of those or reach out to a friend or a professional or something. But yeah, that's our top 10 favorite movies about being sad that might feel uplifting in some way. So hope you've enjoyed this one.